Internal memory strategies are things that we do inside of our mind to help us encode, consolidate, and store new information. Whereas external strategies, which we reviewed in another video, are things outside of our body that we can use to park information so that our retrieval robot doesn't even have to go looking. You just find your sheet of paper where that information is stored or electronic device, and you just have to read it. Without further ado, let's jump into internal memory strategies. Here is our title page for this handout. A little sneak peek of what we'll be reviewing includes the following: visualization, or transforming verbal information into pictures; metaphors, we've talked about those extensively; repetition, which is repeating information again and again; listening for keywords or concepts to help you ignore irrelevant information; associate incoming information with things you already know, like you are piggybacking new information onto concepts that are already well stored in your memory; chunking information so that it's easier to store in bits and pieces; narrative chaining, which is recalling information by embedding it within the context of a story; and we have acronyms, acrostics, and rhyming. The first crucial component of internal memory strategies is remind yourself to pay attention. Am I focused right now? Do your internal scale. Where are you on your scale where 1 represents total relaxation and 10 represents total stress and exhaustion? If you are between 1 and 3, you're in the green zone and ready to achieve things. If you are between 4 and 6, you are in the yellow zone and you can accomplish short and easy tasks. If your score is between 7 and 10, you are in the red zone and you should try to reschedule important tasks for later, or identify why is your score so high and are there any strategies you can implement to get it lower so that you are in a better position to absorb incoming information effectively. Visualization. I use this strategy all the time because I'm a visual learner. I've actually started to keep a dry erase board in my living room so that when I'm having complicated conversations with my husband, I can draw myself little diagrams or keywords or little pictures to help me keep up with all of the incoming information, especially when it's unfamiliar terminology, like when he's telling me about Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering. We've discussed metaphors in detail. I use them all the time. Between my brain is a library metaphor, making your mind map for cognitive communication, listening to information that's coming in rapidly is like it's trying to pass through a funnel and your poor turtle brain can't keep up. All of those are metaphors. And it's much easier for you to keep up with me spitting out facts about cognitive communication if I am using terminology and concepts that are already familiar to you, as opposed to me just shouting out jargon like auditory comprehension, information processing, divergent thinking, convergent thinking, blah, blah, blah. Did you know there's 4 different types of repetition? We're all probably aware of maintenance rehearsal, which is just where you repeat the same thing over and over again. Elaborative rehearsal is one step better because you are doing everything that you do for maintenance rehearsal, but you are also incorporating picturing the items in your head, which is double strength encoding. For bonus points, you can embed the information into a song. Spiraling is the next repetition technique. Have you ever played the picnic game where the first person says, I'm going to a picnic and I'm going to bring a picnic basket? The next person says, I'm going to a picnic and I'm going to bring. They have to repeat what the previous person said before adding their new thing. So person number 2 would say, I'm bringing a picnic basket and a blanket. Person number 3 would have to say, I'm bringing a basket, a blanket, and bread. Person number 4 would say, I'm bringing a basket, a blanket, bread, and juice, etc. So before you add more things, you have to repeat everything that's previously been said. And that's called spiraling. It happens to be a really fun game to play during long road trips. We've also talked about the importance of paraphrasing rather than just repeating verbatim what someone else has said. By paraphrasing, we turn it into an active process. If you just repeat words back to the person in the same way you heard them, you may be interpreting something different than what the speaker intended. So paraphrasing shows whether or not you truly got what the communicator was trying to get across. If you paraphrase, it gives the speaker a chance to correct any misunderstandings. Also, by you saying the information back to the person in your own words, you are saying it, which activates your motor system, and hearing it, which activates your hearing system for extra encoding. When you have to participate in lengthy discussions, whether it's a discovery for your lawsuit or whether it's a lecture at school, it can be overwhelming to listen to an onslaught of all of this information, especially if you have fewer activity points. And if listening tasks cost more activity points for you than it does for an uninjured person. One way you can help your turtle brain ignore irrelevant information, stay focused on the most important bits, and remember those important bits is by paying attention to the 5 W's: the who, the what, the when, the where, the why. As you're listening, can you even write down those 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and then just make quick notes for each one as you're listening? That way, you are then writing as well, which is another great way of encoding. Internal memory strategy number 6 is association, or making connections between related concepts. The example they provide here is, I'm meeting someone new. She has red hair. Her name is Wendy. I can remember that because I will think of the Wendy's logo. So you are associating something new with something that's already well stored and familiar in your brain. Chunking is where you divide a huge amount of information into separate chunks. I heard somewhere that our brain comfortably stores up to 7 chunks of information at a time. I've heard that is why phone numbers were comprised of 7 digits before they added the area code here in Canada. Regardless, you can chunk information by associating it with each other in some way. How can you group this information into distinct categories? If we're using a grocery list as an example, you can chunk things in the obvious way, like according to food type: fruits versus dairy versus meat. But what happens if you have a grocery list that doesn't lend itself nicely to categories in that way because you need a different item from different food groups, for example? This is where we can get creative with our chunking. The example they provided was, you can remember that you have 4 yellow things to buy: bananas, lemons, mustard, and corn. So you can group things by color. We are on to narrative chaining, which I think is a really interesting one. It doesn't work well for me because my strengths are with visualization, not with auditory information. But for people who are auditory learners, this one might work best for you. You tell yourself a story about the information you're trying to remember. So, for example, this is a narrative chaining exercise for a person who is trying to learn the states that formed the Confederacy during the Civil War. Caroline, which to that person stood for North Carolina and South Carolina, and Virginia, went on a trip to visit their friend Georgia, who once lived in Mississippi and now lives in Texas. On their trip, they stayed in FLALA, which stood for Florida, Alabama, and Louisiana, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So that is one way of using narrative chaining to help you recall a string of information. The strategy that works better for me is to make up a ridiculous sentence. The sillier it is, and the more easy it is to visualize, the easier it will be stored in your memory and easier to retrieve. For example, pour detergent on the bananas in the envelopes could help you remember to buy detergent, bananas, and envelopes when you go to the store. Strategy number 9 is acronyms, which is where you create a word out of the initials of each of the words you're trying to remember. I had no idea that SCUBA was an acronym, and it stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. Strategy number 10 is acrostics. I'm most familiar with acrostics through trying to read sheet music. Every good boy deserves fudge, or every good boy does fine, can help you remember musical notes on a scale. My very elegant mother just sat upon 9 pies can help you remember the order of the planets. Our next strategy is rhyming, which I think is really cute. Breakfast pills are pink. 2 to help me think. And our last internal memory today is all about routines. The more you can stick to a routine, the less you have to do active cognitive processing. You just rely on your routine. So for example, you can aim to pay your bills on the last day of every month, or go to the bank every Wednesday, or go grocery shopping every Tuesday, etc. There you have it for some internal memory strategies. In future videos, I'll review strategies that can help you remember names, as well as some miscellaneous other strategies you can use to help you recall kind of random things. Thank you for watching and have a fabulous day.